Welcome back, Camden Catholic, or Honors, as I should say. So we're starting off this part of the unit after the Industrial Revolution, what we were talking about, because the Industrial Revolution is a concept that kind of carries through the entire unit and really changed life in general. So it was something necessary to talk about early. Now what we're getting into is a lot more about how we've established the modern day outlook on the world that we own and accept today, especially this Western hemisphere. Now, sorry, long game yesterday, so my voice is a little bit tired. But anyway, there's a massive movement of Latin American independence that actually occurred during the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it actually led to the establishment of a brand new race of people, new economic patterns, struggles for government, political change, tons of different things. Now, it's actually a very cool thing to talk about, too, because most of it has to do with social classes, and I personally love political science, social class struggles, civil rights law, very neat stuff. And there's also somebody else here with me today that loves talking about these things. He's an expert on it. He's a very close friend of mine. His name is Dr. Rufio. He's unfortunately, I think he's almost asleep right now. He's baby. Do. So he'll give you his input after a little bit. But let's go ahead and get started. So as we're looking at the map right now that's on the screen, this is what the map of the Spanish and Portuguese colonies by 1780 looked like. Now, I'm going to ask you what the problems with this map are as of compared to today, and almost every class will go, well, the colors are different. Well, what's wrong with it? Good job, Dalton, right? So, as you can see, it's broken up into viceroyalties. Now, a viceroy is a governor from a European country, much like Spain or Portugal. So, as you can tell, there's the Viceroyalty of Brazil, owned by Portugal, Viceroyalty of New Granada and La Plata, and that's all the Spanish colonies. So, as we talked about earlier on, following the Spanish conquering and the conquistadors and their encomienda system and the movement towards the west, following Columbus's expedition, there's going to be 25% of the world owned by Spain. But nowadays, we have this setup. So today what we're going to be getting into is it's not Unit 5 anymore. I think we're like Unit 8 or 7. No, I'm not really sure. But this is 1790 to 1914. Independence, nationalism, imperialism. But what we're talking about today is the Latin American independence movements. So we're going to have two flips out of this today. I'm going to take it and I'm going to break it up into two parts. But we're talking about Haiti, and we're also talking about the Latin American independence movements in South America. So a little bit of background going into the South American stuff is the fact that, of course, when they first got there were three major indigenous peoples. There were the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Incas. Now, the European colonization is going to show up in the 1500s by Spain, Portugal, and France. Okay? So now, a timeline of events that led up to these Latin American independence movements and these revolutions is, of course, starting with the English Revolution. Make sure you draw this timeline down here. The English Revolution really set up the idea that one can actually punch a black eye into the face of absolutism, right? Being very John Lockean about it. Natural rights. No Thomas Hobbes anymore. No complete absolutists or monarchs. So that is going to lead to your Enlightenment thinkers. New ideas on government, new ideas on how one should be governed, what is fair, what is not, the social contract structure. Then the American Revolution is going to come off of those Enlightenment ideas because they were inspired by previous events. And then we're going to break away from Britain and be the first successful political revolution. And then the French Revolution is going to come around, which of course you know is up and down and chaotic and tumultuous. And then some guy comes in who's like liberal / conservative at the same time, and his name's Napoleon, and it was a big problem. And their revolution only ended because of the violence, and people just got fed up with it. And it's going to lead into the Latin American independence movements as well. All right, so let's keep going though. The first one that we're going to talk about is a little colony called San Domingue. All right, so San Domingue was actually what you refer to nowadays as Haiti. A couple little backstories really quick. Haiti was actually not established by the Spaniards. It was actually established by pirates. Now, the pirates were actually cruising around all over the Caribbean and robbing Spanish galleons. Now, the pirates actually began to settle down, though, in Haiti and start sugar plantations following the fact that they actually were cattle raisers at first, and they had a very promising leather and beef jerky industry. So it was a Spanish jerky. It was called something. I can't remember what it's called. It's like, anyway, now, but they began robbing these Spanish galleons. And so the French government actually paid them to keep doing that and then to establish a sugar plantation colony on what is now Haiti. And they called it Saint Domingue. And so it was a plantation economy, huge amount of slavery that came through there. This one small half of an island, by the way, the entire island itself that it shares with the Dominican Republic, make sure you write this down, is called Hispaniola, okay? Hispanola. So, what do you think, Rufio? Good stuff? All right, anyway, now, 1 out of every 3 slaves through the entire triangle trade system actually passed through this small island. Now, so 97%, over 90% of the population is going to be African slaves. And it's a huge sugar plantation, like huge. So big, actually, it produced 40% of the world's sugar and 60% of the world's coffee at the time. So very, very good plantations that were going on there, not in the terms of slavery or anything like that, but very high production, and it was like the French piggy bank for a very, very long time. Produced 1/3 of their entire economy. So that right there, also, fun fact, Haiti nowadays produces more professional athletes per capita than any other nation in the world. That's Pierre Garçon. He's a wide receiver for the Redskins. Also, LeBron James is is Haitian by descent as well. So, hence LeBron. His first name is French. All right, anyway, now, so slave upheaval is going to become a huge problem in Haiti, mainly because the slaves are going to be inspired by the French Revolution. They began to run away at very high rates, okay? Now, a lot of them realized because there's less protection and less workers on these plantations anymore because they were being pulled away to go support the French Revolution. So they were running away and dying at very high rates. Running away so much to the point they began to establish these little runaway colonies on the coasts and the beaches. They called them Maroons. Very cool stuff. And anyway, so what they were petitioning for, though, is the right for blacks to vote. Okay, now so there was a large population of free blacks that existed in Haiti as well, and they wanted a right to vote so they could have a say in their political system. That's why they were encouraging the slaves to upheave and run away. So after these maroon colonies were established, blacks were actually given the right to vote by the National Assembly in France. Now, here's the screwed up part, though. Out of all the things the free blacks would vote for, what do you think they would vote for? They actually voted for the right to own slaves themselves. So, Haiti could have had a chance to have a massive slave revolt that would have been very successful, but it was actually held back due to the fact that some wealthy free black families wanted to start plantations of their own and own slaves themselves. So, now, after Maroon revolts and mass slave escapes, free blacks voted for the right to own slaves. Now, remember really, really quickly, what does having a large slave plantation do for you, regardless of your race? Makes you a ton of money, right? So anyway, then that's going to set up the Haitian social class system. Now, unlike most social class systems that existed throughout all of history, theirs is much more like a square and a grid, a lot less like your typical triangle, which we'll talk about in other Latin American countries. So, in Haiti, you had 4 social classes. You had your free blacks, which was about 20,000 people. Now, they were very, very wealthy at the time, had voting rights, and also were kind of very prosperous as a group. Then you had your wealthy white planters, which are Grand Blancs, all right? Now, the Grand Blancs, though, on the other hand, most of them didn't even live in Haiti. Most of them lived back in France. They didn't live there because they just used their plantation money back in France. Why would you want to live in a small French colony when you could live in Paris, right? So then underneath them, you had your white laborers, artisans, overseers, workers, blacksmiths, very simple jobs. They're called your petite blancs, and there are about 30,000 of them. So you can see there's actually more white laborers than there are free blacks. This is going to create a large amount of resentment between these two groups because most of these people had more money and had enough money to own slaves, while these people actually did not have enough money to own slaves, and that created a huge class struggle between the two. So slaves, though, on the other hand, made up 90% of the population. Some historians say actually closer to about 95% of the population. Now, it's going to get very chaotic during the French Revolution, so much to the point that a lot of these white laborers are actually going to push to try and become a country all their own, an independent colony away from France, okay? Now, this is going to lead to a lot of racism and also a lot of chaos in Haiti itself. So much to the point that another huge slave revolt is going to begin. Now, it's actually going to be led by a man named Toussaint Louverture. He actually had a name first. He was actually completely self-educated and changed his name to Louverture. So he's a former slave, complete African descent. Amongst this slave revolt, this huge slave revolt that occurred when when the free whites were trying to establish a democratic free colony on Haiti, but it actually wasn't. Remember, it wasn't called Haiti; it was called Saint Domingue. He was a excuse me. He was a doctor. He was a field doctor in a lot of these battles. Now, the slave armies, though, were very unsuccessful. A lot of mass death. But remember, there's 90% of the population is slaves. So they had lives to spare, unfortunately. At one point during one of the battles later in history, 150,000 of them died in 1 year, but they still were successful and won the entire revolution. So, as you can see, the population numbers were in their favor to be losing up front. So, he actually was a field doctor, though, and he actually viewed and watched the French armies fight the Haitian armies and learned a lot from them. Completely self-educated, taught himself how to read and write, was untrained in military and politics, but actually studied Enlightenment ideas and became a very skilled general and a very skilled diplomat. He actually took leadership of the slave revolt and turned them into a trained force, modeled off the gentleman warfare of France, but then taught them guerrilla warfare aspects he had heard from the American Revolution. And he actually took hold of 100,000 strong slave revolt and successfully, actually, the revolt was so successful that the Spanish, because remember, they lost that half of the island due to all these French pirates, they actually commissioned him as a Spanish officer and made Louverture a Spanish citizen and supported the National Assembly. And the National Assembly is going to outlaw slavery in 1792 in Haiti. Huge success. Louverture has ended slavery in a Spanish colony. Now, keep in mind, though, they're not an independent country. They're still just a colony, subject to many of the laws in France. One of the biggest aspects of this is actually the reason why Louverture could lobby for freedom is because of the Declaration of the Rights of Man that was released in the French Revolution in 1791. So, massive, massive success. Huge slave revolt. It was the only time that a slave revolt had ever been successful in liberating a group of people. The only problem was, write this down really quick, Louverture still believed in the production of sugar because the colony still needed to remain economically viable. So now there were no more slaves. However, they were still working for very low wages and still doing the same jobs that they had before. But they were being paid, and they technically weren't slaves. So at least their children wouldn't be sold off like a corporate stock, right? So anyway. But moving forward, so Louverture had a massive success, right? Huge success, lobbied the French government so much to the point that he actually switched back and became a French citizen after they outlawed slavery. But keep in mind, one person during this era ruins absolutely everything. And it's this guy. Napoleon took control in 1799. 6 years after the successful freedom of all of the slaves. And he established his consulate, remember, i.e. Roman Republic. And he established himself as the first consul. And in his rewritten, when he was rewriting the French Constitution to make himself emperor, he actually brought back slavery. So write that down really quick. Napoleon entered in 1799 and reintroduced slavery into the French colonies. The reason why he wanted to do this was to create a massive French empire. He wanted to take over the entire continent of Europe and then establish imperialism all over the world. So he actually sent troops to Saint Domingue, and they landed in 1802, right? And the French went after Toussaint Louverture, arrested him, and accused him of starting another slave uprising, where they sent him to the French Alps, and he died in prison. Oh, God, why does he have to be such a tool bag? And then he's going to die 10 months later. But the funniest thing happened. These guys, these French soldiers were led by a man named General Leclerc, and he actually, most of their men died from disease. So Jean-Jacques Dessalines, this guy right here with that amazingly cool hat that's got 3 little poof balls on it, is actually going to declare Haiti an independent country after the death of the French general due to yellow fever. So guerrilla warfare, he actually established guerrilla warfare, and even though the French had a massively trained army, they stood no chance against a former slave rebellion leader's guerrilla warfare tactics. And they had a higher immunity to the yellow fever. So anyway, He read a guerrilla warfare outfit, and he actually established a brand new country, declared Haiti